afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Build Once and Integrate for Scale and Speed, with Jeff Wallacott and Andrew Smith. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'm hosting today's webinar. The rise of cloud-delivered software and mobile requires systems management vendors to orchestrate capabilities in increasingly diverse infrastructure stacks. Enterprise customers require secure access to critical work applications on a variety of devices. To meet these requirements, infrastructure management vendors are focused on agile development capabilities, faster software provisioning via partnership and alliances, and increased integration with open source capabilities that enable customers to integrate new workloads and applications quickly. But before I pass this over to Jeff and Andrew to discuss further, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and we'll be posting it to our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments directly through the Q&A or chat function. We'll address them at the end of the presentation, or you can reach out to any one of us individually to set up a private conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides, as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on our SlideShare account at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. And we share all these links with you again at the end of the presentation. With that, let me introduce Jeff and Andrew. Jeff Wallacott is a principal analyst on our software team whose concentration is on channel business model evolution and the impact on traditional resellers and reseller channel programs, data center acquisition, and migration patterns with a focus on how the ownership transformations impact traditional IT services provider business models, and emerging technologies such as social networking, multi-channel marketing, and their influence as disruptors to traditional IT business models. Prior to joining TBR, Jeff owned Renaissance Group, it's been a long day, RGI, which was a boutique market research firm serving blue chip clients such as IBM, HP, and EMC. He's joined by TBR analyst Andrew Smith, who leads quarterly syndicated research on top infrastructure and systems management software vendors, including Dell, HP, IBM, and CA Technologies. Prior to joining TBR, Andrew was a researcher at Forrester. He works closely with IT industry analysts, contributing to the analysis and publication of syndicated reports. Andrew also helped deliver consulting projects for C-level executives and their teams. Andrew has co-authored reports covering business innovation, digital disruption, and customer engagement. And with that, let me hand this over to Jeff.
Thank you, Allison. Let's jump over to the next slide. We'll take a look at what the agenda is today. I can tell you I'm excited to be speaking to you now. I took over the software and BI practice a couple of months ago. We decided we needed to split our standard software vendor benchmark into two. So I need to take a little bit of the webinar real estate today to give you an explanation of that and explain the ways that we're redoing and reevaluating the vendors that comprise the industry. We'll then get into the current market state with the overarching themes and insights from this benchmark. And then we have three, what we're calling theme proof points, where Andrew will dive a little more deeply into the organization shifts, what we're talking about with portability and integration, and then the evolving platform wars. So with that, let me just quickly get into some of the content enhancements that we're doing. This first slide is somewhat of a paid ad here. But the top two here, on the right-hand side for benchmarks. We're here to discuss the infrastructure software management benchmark. We also have an application software vendor benchmark that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. The IM benchmark, as we call it internally, is a guinea pig that we've been working on internally to get the process moving. And then we also have the business intelligence software vendor benchmark, which looks strictly at the BI players. There are some taxonomy shifts, minor tweaks we're doing to that. Matt Healy and I have been working on that, and we will be releasing what those changes are going forward. On the left-hand side, what you see here are the companies that we provide full syndicated reports on. The asterisks mean we do it every 6 months rather than on a quarterly basis. Now, what I want to show you here, this is one of the things, you see the colors on the left-hand side for app-centric, IM-centric, hardware, software, multi-line, and software multi-line vendors. And that is what we're using. You're going to see it in this report. Now, what you see, what's in the infrastructure management benchmark versus applications, as it shows you there by the check boxes. IM-centric vendors, not surprisingly, are in the infrastructure management benchmark, and app-centric ones are in the applications benchmark. So we cascade these colors through all the bubble charts. If you've seen earlier TBR benchmarks, we're using those colors both in the bubble charts to give you essentially 3 mini reports or ways to evaluate the baskets of companies for any commonality or pattern trends, or to see who's best in class and who's lagging by those subsegments. We do call-out boxes that try to assess underneath the bubbles in the benchmark deliverable what we're doing with that. We have future extensions. I'm fascinated by the space right now. I've been at this longer than I care to admit. I've seen a few disruptions in my day, and I think the one that we're in the middle of is going to be far faster than any we've seen before, and I firmly believe that analytics is the sort of the accelerant, the gasoline on the fire, if you will, that is causing it to ignite and move far rapidly. So there's a ton of different issues that I have a little bit of ADHD, so I come in all excited. I talk to Andrew and the other Kelsey Mason and Megan McGrath, who you probably know, on the staff. We sort of drool over the whiteboard and try to figure out what's going on. So future extensions that I know for sure we will be doing is the license subscription cannibalization modeling. That's challenging given that there isn't really a standard way to report that in all the public documents that we use to begin the modeling exercise. That's one piece. The second piece, as a lot of the clients have been talking to me, I know you know it as well as I do, is FASB rule changes that I believe are hitting on 1/1/2017 on how to report ratable revenue or ratable revenue, recurring revenue, subscription revenue, has an impact there. But more importantly is the margin model erosion, and we will get into some of that discussion when I dive into the content here. As the most recent 4Q14 earnings announcements from both Microsoft and VMware in somewhat different spaces were kind of taking they're running the same plays with different personnel, if that's the right way to put it, in terms of what they're doing, and I'll get into that in future. But this is how we're breaking up what used to be called the TBR software quarterly benchmark. We're now doing it in infrastructure and applications, and there is an overlap there for the hardware, software, multi-line vendors and the software multi-line. So each benchmark covers 22 discrete vendors. In total, between the two benchmarks, we address 30 vendors. So with that, let me get into the content. All right, the first thing, if you look at that graphic, I kind of wish the second horse didn't look quite as much as the same color as the gentleman's boots, but the idea here is the notion of changing horses mid-race. And that's going on. Several things are triggering this. It shifts in consumption preferences from license to subscription. It shifts in how it can be delivered based on the cloud, based on elastic infrastructure now, rather than having to buy it and have it on-premise. And so the vendors are having to make this move based on what technology enables for the vendor to do, as well as how the end users want to buy it. And it's a huge, huge shift. Now, the second key point here is the benchmark data shows is that with the consumption shifts, the integration and portability that bakes into infrastructure management is taking what you used to think of, or I used to think of, based on how long I've been around, is infrastructure management is the on-premise management, maintenance, monitoring, optimization of physical infrastructure, making sure it's all working together, and so on and so forth, with app dev tools bought by a firm, and everybody had to use them rather than picking them up on the cloud as you need by project. There's infrastructure management takes both what had been done in the old world, the 2.0 as I call it versus 3.0, or IDC calls it second platform, third platform, IBM calls it the computing era and the cognitive systems era, but this shift from old to new that we're going through. Not only are you dragging on the old pieces of systems management and tweaking it so that you can do it in a single pane of glass for cloud provisioning and maintenance and monitoring, you're also having to bake into that the customer service-driven aspects for automatic metering and billing back to the lines of business. Easy to use calls for infrastructure that will stand up. As you pull the application, it'll automatically pull the infrastructure it needs for the SAP ERP installation, for example, as one end user customer told me was a great thing that had happened in their IT center. All of that is taking this whole area, and you're starting to see, some of the traditional vendors are really starting to stall. You see the emerging, I'm hearing the term emerging cloud OS vendors, Red Hat, Vmware. You can add in there Canonical or SUSE. These guys are now emerging and starting to break away from the pack, as the bubble charts will suggest. And then thirdly is this emerging platform war, and Andrew has a lot to say about that when we get into the scenarios. So there's numerous entrants. You've got SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, EMC, all out there trying to get it. And just like the old days, it's if you build it, they will come. So everybody's trying to anchor these things around a killer application, so the application development community will broaden the ecosystem, and based on the killer app and the plethora of applications, end users will want it. And this is the new, the new skirmish. There's always needs to be a war because color commentators such as myself need to have a game to call. This is the one that we think is going to be heating up as we go forward. Now let's get into some of the charts. As I said, here are the color codes as you see them in terms of the bubble charts. Let me orient you to what this slide is showing. The up and down axis is that goes from -30 to 70% is the infrastructure management revenue growth on a year-to-year basis. You see open text up there at the top. They had an acquisition of GSX to get more into the cloud-based provisioning of these things, and that they kind of spew up there at the top. And then the left to right going from -20 to 70% is the operating margin that these individuals are seeing. So you see in that call-out box where I have the eroding legacy margin edge, here's Oracle and Microsoft that had very traditional on-premise installations for their capabilities, and then you look at the emerging standard lower margin models of Red Hat and Vmware. They're successful. They have a lower operating margin mix. Red Hat for years has been using that sort of subscription model for what they do. They've always been open, so to speak, as opposed to the closed-end things you see with an Oracle or a Microsoft or even IBM software over there. But some of what they're hitting is also that attrition into consumption of some of their middleware offerings of the platform as a service provision, so that the licensing revenue there is starting to slow up. What we have here is the license revenue growth. As you see from the call-outs, we see VMware and Red Hat. You're always going to see them kind of standing off by themselves in these bubble charts, and everybody else kind of clustering more towards the axis. What I should have also said to you, I apologize, is the red dotted lines that give you the average, so you can tell if they're above or below average for the different axes. Again, up and down is infrastructure management revenue growth year to year, and then it's license revenue growth year to year is the left to right. We see EMC picking up on this. We see that as the acceleration of Viper, as that's coming out in the software-defined data center. Oracle, we're expecting to see some uptick there as 12c begins to gain traction. SAP, as they just announced S4, HANA, we'll expect to see them start to make some moves as well. But that's the current state as we see it in here. And what I want to do, the next two slides, I like to jump back and forth between them. But what we have, what you see here is maintenance revenue growth. And what I did on this one and the next one is I made sure that the axes are the exact same in terms of the scale. Because if you jump back and forth, you're going to start to see some separation. What we see in the maintenance side, and we want to solicit feedback from our client base on this, but maintenance revenue we see as a lagging indicator to license. If license is up, then 12 months from now when the warranty's over and they're buying the subscription, a maintenance support package, it's a lagging indicator to how well did license do from the prior year. So as we see more and more attrition to the cloud and therefore cannibalization, erosion of the license revenue, we're expecting to see the maintenance revenue performance start to decline. And it's starting to slow. You can see IBM Software and Microsoft with the SaaS and PaaS impact are already hitting over there. Oracle with the all red stack desires is still hanging on tight there. 12c is going to have some impact with that. And then you have some of the smaller entrants there like CA and Copyware who are facing their challenges as I said, as AppDev moves from being sort of an on-prem enterprise-wide license to something that's being consumed by the SIP on a subscription basis when you're doing AppDev on the cloud. But what I want to show here now is a jump, because I'm going to go into the professional services revenue, and if you see that kind of two aggregate clusters there just around the axis, when you jump to this one, you start to see more separation as to what's going on. And so you see the mature entrants are sort of sliding down. There's a lot going on as to why the mature entrants are having that happen. I worked one of the jobs I had before taking this one on at TBR was working in the professional services group on a consulting basis. This is my first syndicated gig. I've always been a consultant, so I'm kind of new to this. But what we were studying there is the breakup of sort of the large ITO deals that were coming up for renewal, kind of ITO 3.0. And rather than these mega 10-year deals that were shorter deals, 2 to 3 years in length. And there's several challenges to that. If you think about it, if you just want to keep your sales expense to revenue as a percentage constant, you're going to have to do it for a third of the dollars if you're going to a 3-year deal from a 10-year deal. You've got to become that much more efficient in how you just develop your proposal and get it to market. It can't be custom-based. You've got to have the frameworks. You've got to have the utilities. You have to have the tools. The other thing that was happening with some of this revenue decline, and IBM was very candid about this in the last couple of quarters. Last year haven't been as kind to them, but prior to that, they were talking about a couple of points in declining revenue and an uptick in operating margin of about 2 to 3 points. So, yeah, you can't build a sustainable business on that, but when you're in the type of disruption that we're in, I think it's pretty darn good to be able to keep the revenue at a point or two down while picking up the margin. So you're seeing some of that happening, which is that rationalization of the legacy deals, and you have to pass back some of the cost savings, and where the cost savings we feel is coming is through analytics, through services automation, stripping more bodies out of the delivery model. The kind of catch-all phrase I have is the shift from bank tellers to ATM machines. It's less costly, therefore you have to pass that savings along. Now on the right-hand side, as you see the cloud components, folks, what we're seeing there is that would be more of the technology-led consulting in terms of how do we do data migration, how do we change the underlying fundamental infrastructure and the fabric to be able to have our private cloud and quickly move workloads back and forth from a private environment to a public environment, which is the name of the game that everybody's talking about evolving into that hybrid cloud environment. So that's where you see Red Hat and Vmware. That would be more of the technology-led consulting. If you're looking at IBM, HP, some of those, it's going to be more the strategy-led consulting. And in our professional services group, the management consulting benchmark and the predictions we did, Patrick Heffernan and I, we expect to see a big uptick in strategy consulting around business process management, change management, based on no longer being constrained by how much can you afford to buy on-prem to develop your systems of engagement and your systems of transaction. You're not constrained that way anymore, so you really need to rethink strategically what your business wants to get out of it. Now with that, we're going to get into some of the vendor highlights and the overarching themes where you'll hear from the brains of the operation. Andrew Smith will be doing more of the talking than I do. And with this, I'll turn it over to Andrew, or do you want me to take this first slide?
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, like Jeff said, in the benchmark, we cover these scenarios kind of more in depth, and we'll go over them today in terms of kind of some of the preliminary findings that we're focusing on. The first two topics are kind of related to one another, and they address the shifts in both in vendor organizations internally and their product portfolios as customers kind of demand different solutions as they move to more cloud-based infrastructure. They look for more consumerized applications and workloads, that are, device and deployment agnostic, that type of thing. So with the first one, demand for software solutions forces companies to shed non-core commodity assets to stay relevant. So we can jump ahead. Into the slide. What we're looking at is, we're focused on kind of how major vendor reorganizations are, both what the impact is going to have on their financials and on their product portfolios and on customers and their legacy install bases. And I think that the reorgs that are going on, when you look at Symantec, HP, CA divesting some of the part of their business, it's not because these vendors have drastically fallen behind the curve or fallen behind the competition. There's a lot of opportunity that these reorgs are creating for vendors to reallocate financial resources in terms of R&D, partnership opportunities, acquisition opportunities, to kind of give their product, especially infrastructure management products, kind of that jolt they need in terms of innovation to catch up to customer demands. Symantec is one that I'm particularly interested in, as they kind of separate their IM business and their IM portfolio out from the security portfolio. And recently we saw Symantec and HP partner on a disaster recovery as a service solution, which I think is going to be very interesting. I think we'll see more partnerships like this moving forward as it increases that kind of co-opetition. But Symantec having its IM portfolio now separate, there's less conflict of interest, there's less confusion here, and there's more opportunity for them to partner with vendors like HP that gives them kind of better integration through Healy and OpenStack. Now you're talking about kind of that open source developer led integration and cloud integration and stronger data recovery capabilities. So you're opening, Symantec is opening up new customer bases and new opportunities for its products. I'd also, we are following the IBM's internal reorganization pretty closely, because it underscores the difficulty that even large established vendors are having, like IBM, to transition some of their legacy install base, especially in their middleware portfolio, over to their strategic imperatives and their more high growth areas of cloud analytics and what that means for products like Bluemix, SoftLayer, and older legacy middleware solutions that like Cognos and that they need to kind of kick into a higher gear. And I'll pause here to let Jeff add anything on IBM, because you're the expert on that.
Right. The IBM reorg, when we did get a good briefing on it. They left R&D alone. They left sales and distribution alone, comma, as it stands, and that's me feathering an opinion. And then they created the 6 units of analytics, Watson, commerce, systems. I always miss one. Systems, security. Who am I missing?
Analytics, commerce, and Watson.
Analytics, commerce, Watson. Systems, security. What's the one that I'm missing? I always do that. I always screw up in this one. And then you have global services that is behind it. But the key point on this, cloud, for God's sake. Yeah. Cloud is
no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. It's infrastructure, it's sort of infrastructure and PaaS. That's what triggered it, is remembering why commerce is so interesting, because commerce is going to be the SaaS layer, cloud is going to be the infrastructure and PaaS layer. And then around commerce, analytics, and Watson will be more, they're going to start building out what I consider to be almost like partnership models that you would find in a management consulting firm like Accenture, so that the real strategy-led solutioning will be coming out of these units with very senior talent that understand the businesses and what the line of business buyers want and need. And they will execute those things and create the solution set, and then global services will fulfill against it. So you've got sort of a transactional engine that has the frameworks and the base layer capabilities and technical skills, and then the industry-specific plug-and-plays or the very, very high-end PhD-level data scientist plays for analytics and Watson will be coming out of those units. And then on the flip side of that, for the kind of old world order systems, if you want to buy the base layer infrastructure and have it on-prem, that comes out of systems rather than out of cloud. And then security is there, obviously, as the overarching overlay. And security has a whole bunch of different things that are hitting it. As we know, most of the venture capital startup money is going into the security and the new kinds of security algorithms and protections that are needed as more and more of this is moving out over the cloud rather than a behind the firewall kind of defense. And with that, I'll be quiet and get it back to Andrew.
So, you know, the key takeaway for this scenario is that the reorgs we're seeing, the shifting strategy across the vendor landscape, especially in the IM landscape, it's not a coincidence, and it underscores kind of that tipping point that you'll hear Jeff talk about. You know, this is a significant transition. Vendors realize that, and they're doing what they need to in terms of portfolio shifts and internal shifts to avoid disruption. So let's move on. We can click down 2 slides to the next. So on the flip side, you know, our previous scenario kind of is vendor focused and internal focused. Now we're moving over to kind of a portfolio and a solutions focus, and how customer demands continue to kind of press the IM space to move and adapt, and how key players are reacting to that. So like the scenario says, you know, new business demands clash with traditional management structures, and vendor responses are largely driven by target markets, which is, you know, seems kind of obvious, but it's a key part of strategy moving forward. Now, what we're focused on, and especially thinking about some of the vendors in the benchmark, Vmware, Red Hat, the proliferation of cloud and hybrid cloud workloads is really redefining the infrastructure management space. Now, and even when Jeff and I were talking about EMC just a little while ago, they made several key acquisitions in October of Imaginatics, Spanning, to really try and seize opportunities to help manage cloud infrastructure and make that kind of develop that expertise. And that is a reaction to what customers are looking for. Jeff mentioned it earlier, you know, the infrastructure management, it has to accomplish, the portfolio still has to include tools that can accomplish all the basic things of making sure the right lights are blinking, making sure that IT has kind of a single pane of glass look into management. But now it's moving, it's as LOB customers are kind of becoming king and IT's becoming less of a, you know, having to cede more decision-making space to the business, there is a much more important push to include those more, you know, sexy things within the portfolio for analytics, for data management, for, you know, high compute, scalable and integrated applications. So that's what we're following here. When we look at vendors like Case, we had them, or sorry, vendors like Dell, we had them on the previous graph as kind of a transformational position, and Dell has been doing a lot with their Case systems management appliance. They now offer a Case as a service option with Android integration for systems management, and this goes straight to the heart of, you know, what we're talking about in terms of play to your strengths and play to your market, because Dell's sweet spot among SMBs, especially in healthcare and education markets, that's where they're looking to kind of make their mark and start to not only defend their install base, but transition them over to the high demand workloads that they need, you know, moving forward. So we think Dell is transitioning, but seeing success there, and on their strategic roadmap looking forward, they're going to be focused on embedding more data and analytics capabilities into offerings like systems management offerings like Case. You see them doing that now with Boomi, continuing to integrate that assets from Boomi into systems management. we're also, once again, closely following IBM here because I think IBM epitomizes the struggle between, legacy software install base and next generation migrating to cloud, because their software is, as we saw from their recent earnings, their software segment is, they're placing their bets squarely on that segment to deliver those, to help them deliver better earnings per share and help them make up that revenue that they need among their developing their strategic priorities. So there's a bit of, as IBM is pushing these strategic priorities, they're taking a hit on their legacy base because they're eroding their own license base through new subscription-based solutions. So they're taking a little bit of a double hit there, but it's that cannibalization is in some aspects necessary as they move forward. And this is all part of the story, the developing story that we're following. And once again, I'm going to pause and hand it back to Jeff as I stop
and catch your breath.
Yeah.
When we talk about this legacy install base and then the strategic imperatives to cannibalization of traditional business models, this struck me, and I think I referenced it earlier in this call. As I said, I have a hard time staying focused. There's so many things going on. I can't remember when I pop out what nugget, but Microsoft and Vmware's earnings announcements this time followed a very similar theme, although they were talking about two entirely different things. One was about Office to Office 365, and the other one was about vSphere and that kind of piece of their business having been more in an enterprise license and now putting it out and pushing it out as a service over vCloud Air. And as I was talking with Andrew, what it is if you are in one of those legacy situations, you're in the massive transformation, we know what you need to get through all this is working capital, because the subscription base, if you look at all the business models that relied on subscription to build up a profitable business, which is largely magazines and print media prior to moving to the internet and getting clobbered, it took you a couple of years before you turned a profit. Your sales reps are almost like the life insurance model. Now, that isn't going to work when you have an enterprise-wide rep who's been selling license transactions and he or she's top in the class. So why does he need to change his strategy or her strategy? He's slaying it as it is, and it isn't going to fly. So there's all these different things that are hitting, and what has to happen is you have to kind of sacrifice one of your fatted calves in order to survive, to get over. So what are we seeing? We're seeing low-cost Windows operating systems for sub-9-inch devices. We're seeing free Office 365 trials as a defensive hold strategy. What is VMware doing? You've got vSphere in the license space. You've got vSphere being sold as sort of the arms dealer with the attachments of the network and the mobility pieces around it. But the linchpin is that they were known for server virtualization. So now you're bringing it over, you're arming the public cloud providers, and then you're going back to your enterprise guys to say, hey, if you're trying to move for the hybrid cloud, you're using our infrastructure over here, and here's all the partners we have using it on these public clouds. This ought to make it easier for you. Larry Ellison and Oracle are saying, we do the hard work for you if you stay in an all Oracle red stack. We've done the integration. We're doing the hard work for you. So these are the pieces that are going on as the business demands are starting to clash with how these structures are. It's like, all right, we need hybrid. Well, what are the technical complexities? What are the underlying pieces that's moving from license to subscription? How much can we take a hit? How long can we survive while we do this in order to have the cross-sell, upsell opportunities and attachments as long as we maintain the install base? Because anytime you're in a massive disruption, as we are in now, the incumbent vendor status is at its weakest because they're looking at everything at that point in time, and they'll look at other vendors rather than just the incumbent. So you got to buy your way in to retain that share to get through to the other side of this thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the last key takeaway I would add to summarize this slide is that that there's, the relentless march of cloud is
right.
It's inevitable. It's changing infrastructure management. It's becoming cloud infrastructure management, and that's the financial implications that come along with that, the portfolio implications that come along with that. that is what, that's the major scenario that we're looking at here. All right, so we can double jump down. The last scenario, Jeff touched on it just a little earlier, the platform wars. It's, as analysts, we always say that we love a good war, that we can kind of, as long as we can peer through the glass and do our, stay out of it, we can add some value. But, systems management vendors, well, let me start over. The platform wars, there's a history to it. It started PC versus Apple, and we saw who came out on top there and the implications. Then it moved kind of to the infrastructure layer. We had x86, CISC, and RISC. x86 moved on. Then the battle kind of became for the virtualization and the hypervisor layer, and we had vendors like Vmware kind of come out as front runners. And now what has shifted the I guess the front lines of this battle now is data. As we look at data more as kind of the most important natural resource of the enterprise today, or the lifeblood of the enterprise, as you'll hear my colleague Matt Healy say all the time, it's imperative for vendors to become kind of the curator and the janitor, I guess, of that data. They want they will be extremely valuable to their customers the tighter they stay to their customers' data needs, if that makes sense. So looking back, hardware-centric battles. Today, data-centric battle, and we're looking, vendors like SAP and HANA, Oracle 12c, Microsoft emerging kind of its traditional Office capabilities with Azure, IBM bringing Watson and Software and Bluemix, EMC kind of bringing the whole consortium to bear through VMware and Pivotal. Red Hat is doing this through, OpenStack and OpenShift using those platforms. This is going to be there will be, seismic battles going on between these heavyweights as they fight to manage customer data, because as we're kind of as the data deluge continues, customers are not only looking for places to kind of store and access the data, but now the next step in that conversation is, can you provide me the applications, the scalability and the integration I need to, launch those applications wherever I need to and kind of get my job done and using the data that my company has at hand. So that's a major piece of the puzzle. And I think that's another good place for me to pause and hand it back to Jeff.
Okay, I was going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it was a webinar I did, and I talked about the 2030 worlds. And really what it is, I was talking with our VP of Research, Stuart Williams, just about 2 hours ago, getting ready for this thing. And what I said to him is, everything I thought I knew about this industry cold, up until about 2009, 2010, I feel like I wake up now and it's always opposite day. And I had, pounded into my skull this simple triangle with, double-ended arrows going between the three pieces that constituted the network. That was the CPU, the storage, and the I/O. And I/O meaning, the terminal, the keyboard, the PC, whatever it was, how you were accessing, where the human got into it. And my mentor would just go through the history of IT based on where the constraint was around that three-box triangle with the pipe, meaning the network. And how, when there was two of the triangles would then sort of catch holds to take more of it on as they were constrained in how the data and the compute flowed around that triangle. And I was sitting at the EMC World, the last one in 04, or I'm sorry, in 14, and Paul Moritz put up the new data fabric triangle, and that kind of, it hit me like a lightning bolt. It's like, oh, all right, this, it's what I know doesn't matter anymore. That's the hardware piece. And his triangle was apps, data, and analytics. You have to store it, you have to have the application to get it, And the value, the true accelerant, is how quickly can you get to intelligence? How quickly can you get to a business output? And so the analytics is critical. The cleanliness of the data is critical. Then you start talking, do you move the app to the data, or do you move the data to the app? That gets into Flash and in-app analytics and all these different things versus the data lake, which you would probably use far more for the larger analytics queries that are more for data exploration. Just the triggering of the muscle memory to get you to think about things differently, to come up with an innovation that gives you a competitive edge. All that having been said, the competitive advantage you get from these things, whatever it is, the new action, it was like Target Analytics that was profiled in the New York Times like Easter Sunday 2 years ago about something, it was looking at pregnancy and deciding that that was a big life-changing decision when you changed all your buying patterns, and they had these predictive analytics to do it. Emailed some 15-year-old girl, the father was furious, and then he emailed back 2 weeks later to apologize because she was indeed pregnant. They wouldn't explain how they had uncovered this with their analytics. But these are the kinds of things that through data mining, through sophisticated analytics, will bring that competitive advantage out. It will strip out more of the sort of knowledge worker middle managers, such as your current speaker. So I could be handing out carts at Walmart in retirement. I've got to be careful here. But these are the things that are transforming all of this. And so which person or which vendor will come up with the platform that best addresses what lines of business need, as well as simplicity from the infrastructure and IT side to manage, maintain, monitor, meter, and bill back to the lines of business is going to be critical to who's going to come out of this thing. You know, this isn't to say that SAP or Oracle or IBM or any of these people are going to die in this transformation, but their market share stats could radically change in this transformative cycle that we're in. And with that, we'll turn it over to questions. Real quickly, we had one, would you know where IBM Mobile First portfolio is sitting with the ongoing IBM reorg? I'm pretty sure they said that sits in commerce, because if you think about commerce, their real pincer movement in commerce has been the CMO side, with the CMO as the mobile worker, as well as the data capture of your end customers who want the facility of mobile access for online ordering, or just, you know, figuring out where the store locators and things like that. So I believe it is it sits within commerce. If I find out that was incorrect, I will be sure to email back to the body here. But that's
we know Bruno well. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, another question come through. Bruno, I hope you appreciate the shout out. The next question we have in queue is, can you go into more detail about what sort of marketing will be most effective, both brand and product?
Interesting. I think the SAP message about run simple, and the idea of simplifying the data landscape is going to resonate from some other work. I still, you know, old habits die hard. I still work on custom engagements for the intellectual expansion and knowledge share. I do a lot of interviews with large end customers, CIOs. I have some fascinating discussions with these folks, get them for an hour, hour and a half. Always learn something. And what I've been hearing is analytics is really interesting in terms of everybody says they're doing it on the one hand. In terms, and you know, you can argue if you had a spreadsheet from Lotus, you were doing analytics, right? So that's the problem, is analytics has a very broad, just like big data, has a very broad set of terminology and definitions. That's why we call it business intelligence, because if it doesn't get out to business value, what's the point? And what a lot of these firms have been talking about is the strategic ones, as I'll call them, are talking about the fact that they really haven't figured out what bet they're going to make on analytics, that what they have been doing is going back into the strategy-led piece, doing the change management, business process management, evaluation as to how they can restructure and reorganize the information, both the people flow and the information flow within the organization. Then they're making sure their data is sort of secure, rational, cleansed, sanitized. You know, the janitor comes in, cleans it up. After they get through this, comma, then they're going to get into the big bets on analytics. So it would augur well for SAP S/4HANA. It augurs well for Watson, which we can also see is springing up community clouds around, and I'm not sure if I'm using that term correctly, but the idea that, say, for industry, for the insurance industry, you'd have some analytics engine so you could go query it about what is my exposure for insurance claims if a Cat 4 hurricane hits from, I don't know, Delaware to New York City. Those kinds of analytics tools that community clouds can be built out around that using the data lake rather than necessarily an in-app analytics kind of query charged by the SIP. A shift in monetization of, there's no charge for the data you store, there's charge for the data you extract and run the queries on because you're standing up the instances and so on and so forth. So that messaging is, I think, around the simplicity, and then secondarily would be the ROI on the investment. How quickly can you show return on investment? Yeah, Andrew, you have anything to add to that rambling response?
The only thing I would add is that I'm increasingly of the opinion that, or I agree with the idea that software is your brand moving forward, and by that, we're talking about things like Watson and whatever other software IP you have are increasingly your brand, the face of your brand to customers, and mostly, more and more increasingly the LOB customer. So that is going to be an increasingly important piece of kind of the marketing puzzle moving forward. And more specifically, it's what your brand, what your piece of software analytics can do with their data, to Jeff's point. So that's the only thing I would add.
Right. Well, that's the fundamental shift, is we used to be able to monetize what we built.
Right.
In terms of hardware, silicon, how well we did that. Today, it's the intellectual property that the firm holds, and to automate it, you've got to turn it into software. And so you have to take that IP and monetize it, and we see the struggle on that on professional services more so than anywhere else. Because if you can find a better, faster way to deliver the same service, and you're in that intensely competitive environment, and you're used to building out your pricing methodology based on how many hours of what body at what billable rate. I mean, that's how I was taught to do it in the mid-'80s when I got into consulting, right? Take the body, take the cost, multiply by 3, 4, or 5, and that's what you quoted. And you can't do that anymore because you're not going to get the profit necessary to keep reinvesting in the innovation that you need to stay ahead of your competitors. So we have to learn, this industry, have to learn how to better monetize IP rather than tangible product, or we're just going to have a race to the bottom that will go faster than even I'm worried it's going to be.
Yep.
Ready? Next
Yep.
question? Okay.
Last question. Next question.
We got a couple more in queue, so if anybody else out there has questions, please send them through now.
All right.
Another question we had is, are there any more aspects of the whole product? I don't know if you need.
You need more aspects of the whole product.
That's the question I got. Want to come back to that?
I'm not sure what, the whole product, meaning the solution bundle. Is that what it means?
I'll wait to get to that follow-up back. We might not. Yeah. All right. Second other question in queue. Is there a premium play in the quote-unquote good enough category?
I think the premium play is in your cross-sell, upsell capabilities. And I'm going to reference what CEO Nadella said in the Microsoft earnings announcement talking about Office 365 and how well it's been doing. And that premium play, again, the thick of the idea is they gave away a free Office 365 capability, limited capability, to put it on Apple and Android devices, so that it's sort of a preemptive strategy, so you didn't get, I don't know what I bet on my Android device, I think it was Polaris or something. I just went to the App Store and hit yes because I needed to read a PowerPoint deck on the fly. Right? If I had the Office 365 thing, I would have grabbed that. And what they were saying is the move to Office 365 is now adding on a subscription or as a service basis things like Lync Outlook and Exchange, and thinking as having been a small business owner where I didn't have a server on site, I just had, laptop licenses for Office. I never would have even thought of using those things, and therefore if I had it as a cloud piece and the 4 or 5 contractors I had working for me wanted it, I probably would have said, yeah, let's try Link or one of these things and see how well it works. So that premium play is in how broad-based a set of portfolio devices do you have that seamlessly stitch together and make it easy to get these things done. And having said that, I would argue if somebody come up with an easier way to integrate word processing, spreadsheets, and presentation graphics than our current de facto standard, I wouldn't have as much gray hair as I have here trying to get products out the door that integrate all those things now.
Okay. It looks like the person who asked that earlier question left the webinar, so okay. We're going to let it be. Last question we have in queue right now is, can the multiple device strategy work with smartphones?
The multiple device strategy work with smartphones? Well, yeah, I think it can, in the sense that if you're writing to some standard APIs for your software to then get it down to these different OSs, you're going to be able to bring it back up for the aggregation. I mean, that's kind of the key for the mobile worker. That's the key of mobile device management and office collaboration and productivity. I mean, this issue's been around for a couple of years. Andrew, you're looking at me like you got something, so go ahead.
I think it's got to work for mobile devices because vendors like CA have kind of hitched a lot of their strategy on Mobile Development Suite as a way to kind of reach application developers and that LOB/C suite, kind of straddling the line there. I mean, it certainly is going to be a very important part of management solutions moving forward. So, I mean, that's the only thing I would add.
Yeah.
All right. So it looks like we don't have any other additional questions in queue. So I'm going to start to wrap everything up. As I mentioned, I was going to share all the social media links with you, and I've also shared the photo of the 2 handsome devils that just gave you this presentation. So I do encourage everyone to follow the analysts on Twitter. Not on the slide, but I do encourage folks to reach out to these guys on LinkedIn as well to follow what they're doing in terms of their research. And you can also follow their research on Twitter, SlideShare, and our homepage as well. So as you're leaving the webinar, there is a really short survey. How valuable was the information you got? How good was the presenters? And if there's any other open-ended feedback. Because this is a new benchmark and a new webinar, we're very keen to hear what you guys think. We're trying to restructure our content to make sure that we're delivering the most value we can to you. So if there's things that you want to see more of, less of, whatever feedback, we want to hear it, and if we can incorporate it, we will. So please do share that with us. Again, like I said, here's all the social media links. And if you would like to set up a private conversation, please send us a note. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the conversation, and we'll do this again, next quarter, or is it 6 months?
It's next quarter. We got the apps one coming soon.
All right. So, yeah, this month we have apps.
End of this month. Yeah.
All right. So keep an eye open for apps and infrastructure next week and next month rather. And if you have any questions, give us a call, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.